My name is Lucas, and what I'm about to share is anything but simple. I've spent my entire life within the church, teaching the faith and helping people find God in their final moments. I always believed that when my time came, I would depart peacefully, wrapped in the assurance of eternal rest. But I was wrong. Nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced in that moment between life and death. Everything I held to be true vanished in the face of what I encountered. And even now, despite my attempts to articulate it, I feel I will never be able to fully explain what happened, but I will try. I have been a priest my whole life, devoted to God's service, to the traditions of the church, and to the mission of guiding souls along the path of faith. I spent decades preaching, listening to confessions, organizing funerals, and praying with those on the brink of death. When I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I accepted my fate with resignation. I knew my life was coming to an end, and despite the physical pain, I tried to remain strong, trusting that my path was just. My final moments were filled with prayers. My family was by my side, and other priests prayed softly while I, weakened, simply waited, hoping to find what I had always spoken about. I closed my eyes, felt my breath fading, and finally, darkness enveloped me. But instead of the heavenly peace I had anticipated, I found myself in a place I could never have imagined. The first thing I noticed was the absence of everything. There was no light, no darkness, just an utter void. It was as if I was suspended in a formless, timeless, soundless space. I tried to move, but there was no ground beneath me, nor air around. There was neither cold nor warmth, just the sensation of existing somehow, but without any point of reference. For a moment, I questioned whether this was truly my end, if my soul had simply faded into the void. But soon enough, I began to perceive something around me. A dense gray mist started to form, enveloping me in a kind of thick smoke that twisted and filled that space, giving shape to forms. At first, I thought it was just my mind creating images in that void. But soon I realized I wasn't alone. There were no sounds, yet I sensed presences around me. They were hidden within that mist. Initially, they appeared as indistinct shadows, figures without defined edges, but gradually they became clearer, tall, dark silhouettes drawing closer to me. Then I heard, not with my ears but inside my heart, whispering voices, words that were not fully spoken but emerged in my mind, as if they were being breathed into my very being. These voices were soft and insistent, filled with an energy that sent shivers down my spine. They were not ordinary words, but empty phrases of accusation and anguish. It was at that moment that fear completely enveloped me. Death shouldn't be like this. Where was God? Where was the peace I had spoken of so often? I tried to pray. My immediate instinct was to call upon the name of God, to seek protection, to scream for help. But something terrible happened. My voice wouldn't come out. I tried, I swear, but it felt like my words died before they could take shape. Terror overwhelmed me. I had always thought my faith was solid, that my bond with God was unbreakable. But there, in that suffocating void, I realized I had no control over anything. The shadows around me kept moving, slowly approaching, and the feeling of being watched became unbearable. They had no faces, yet I knew they were looking at me, that they knew me. It was then that I understood this was not just a strange place. It was a waiting room, a space where souls were trapped. But why was I there? And those voices? They whispered more intensely, overlapping as if they wanted to annihilate me. And then, suddenly, I felt a different presence, something greater, something that made me tremble from head to toe. It was not a shadow like the others. It was something more powerful, more ancient, with a deep awareness, and in that moment I understood that it wasn't a dream nor a mistake. I was facing something I could never have imagined encountering after death. I couldn't explain how, but that entity carried with it a tremendous weight, a dark authority that made me feel more insignificant than ever. It was then that the worst doubt struck me. I was in the wrong place. All my years of devotion had proven to be in vain. My mind screamed in protest, "No, it can't be. I was a servant of God. I had dedicated my life to Him, taught His word, and guided others along the path of faith. How could I find myself here, in a place devoid of light, surrounded by presences that radiated such oppression?" I felt a despair growing within me that I had never experienced before. I had always believed that when my time came, I would find peace. But in that moment, I realized how powerless I was and how small I felt in the face of what was happening. It was then that everything changed. The shadows around me began to withdraw, as if something greater was approaching. The fog began to lift, and for the first time since my arrival, I saw something beyond the emptiness in front of me, as if it was emerging from the very air itself. Images began to form, not simple visions, but scenes unfolding before my eyes with incredible clarity. I saw the world I had left behind, but not as I knew it. The cities glowed with artificial lights and technology, yet there was something strange, as if an invisible darkness loomed over them, something that the people were not perceiving. I saw families gathered, but at a distance from one another, distorted by screens and empty distractions. I observed churches filled to the brim with worshippers, but devoid of God's presence. Preachers spoke to crowds, but their words felt empty and lacking in truth. The gospel I knew was being watered down, transformed into something pleasing without challenge and without repentance. The reality of the world hit me hard, like a hammer. The time for genuine faith was fading, and few seemed to realize it. As these images flowed before me, I felt something strange deep within my soul, a weight, a pain, a guilt, whose origin I could not identify. I had spent my life teaching about God, faith, and the church, but did I truly know the truth? I began to understand something terrible. I saw those crowded churches, those temples full, yet spiritually empty, and something within me whispered, "You are part of this." My heart tightened. The awareness struck me with brutality. I had spent years caught up in rituals, traditions, and rules, but had I genuinely taught people to seek God in an authentic way? Had I taught them to love God, or merely to follow a set of doctrines? This thought hit me like a punch in the gut. I believed I was serving God correctly, but now I realized that often my service was directed more toward religion than toward Christ. And then, suddenly, everything around me trembled. The void, the shadows, the fog vanished. An intense and powerful light appeared. It was not an ordinary light. It wasn't just bright, but vibrant, a pure presence, an authentic holiness. In that precise moment, I understood who it was that stood before me, even before I saw his face. My heart already knew it was him. It was Jesus. The only thing I could do was fall to my knees, not because I was forced, but because his presence was overwhelming. His holiness revealed every weakness, every doubt, every fault that I wasn't even fully aware of. And it was in that moment that he spoke, not with a powerful voice, nor through shouting or condemnation, but through a simple question that penetrated my soul. "Do you know me?" I froze. That question resonated within me in a way I can't explain. "Do you know me?" It was so simple, yet it struck me like lightning. Of course I knew him. I had spent my whole life talking about him, teaching about him, preparing people to meet him, but then a terrible weight fell upon me. Did I truly know him? My heart began to beat faster, as if something inside me was being torn away. Fear swept over me, not a normal fear, but a deep terror, because in that moment I understood the truth. I knew of Jesus, but I did not know him. I knew him through traditions, doctrines, and scriptures, but I had never truly sought him. I had never established an intimate connection with him. Before him, all my religiosity, all my knowledge, and my pride crumbled like dust carried away by the wind. I don't know how long I remained on my knees, unable to utter a word. It was as if my soul stood naked before him, without excuses, without masks, without titles. Then Jesus began to show me something even deeper. The visions returned, but this time they were not only about the world, but about the church. I saw magnificent temples filled with gold and incense, yet spiritually empty, with leaders who started with sincerity, only to be seduced by money, power, and the desire to be loved and followed. I saw preachers trading the truth for comforting words, more concerned with filling their churches than sharing what truly came from God. A diluted gospel transformed into a reassuring message, devoid of confrontation, the cross, and sacrifice. And I watched millions of people follow these falsehoods, not realizing they were drifting away from the true Christ. Every image that passed before me felt like a direct blow to my soul. I saw churches where the presence of God was no longer there, but no one seemed to notice. People participated in religious celebrations, raising their hands, singing and crying, but all of it was driven by emotion, not by authentic spirit. I saw crowds seeking miracles, blessings, and quick solutions to their problems, but there was a lack of genuine desire to know God. And what was even more tragic, many of those people believed they were safe, thinking they were serving God, when in reality they were merely following a hollow religious system. This devastated me internally. I saw myself there as one of those responsible for this situation. I had dedicated my life to preaching tradition, imparting rules, and preparing people to follow rituals. But had I truly taught them to seek Jesus? Had I instilled in them a love for God, or just obedience to a set of doctrines? Then I saw something else. I saw small hidden churches, places where a few people gathered. There were no imposing temples, no luxury, no spectacles, yet amid all this the presence of God was palpable. I saw persecuted Christians, people arrested for their faith, martyrs killed for refusing to deny Christ. In those places, the glory of God was tangible. They didn't need grand spectacles, famous preachers, or motivational messages. They had the truth. They had God with them. Thus, I understood that the true gospel was not found in crowds deceived by comfort, success, or the allure of convenience. The true gospel was among those who were ready to lose everything, to suffer, to be rejected, but who would never exchange the truth for something easier. This revelation struck me like a lightning bolt. I had spent my entire life within the church, yet at that moment I realized that my faith was more based on structure than on relationship. I thought I was serving God in the right way, but now I saw that many times I was simply keeping a system alive, believing I was leading people toward Christ. Was I truly bringing them to Him, or just to rituals and traditions, to what I considered safe? My heart grew heavy with this revelation, for before Jesus I understood that knowing something about God did not equate to knowing Him authentically. To my great surprise, I realized I was not alone. Religious leaders, pastors, and priests had started sincerely, yet many had lost their way, confusing calling with status, influence, and acceptance. My soul burned with a mix of guilt and despair. If this was true, if the church was drifting so significantly, what would happen to all those who blindly followed that path? What would become of the people who thought they were safe, but had never truly known God? I saw a dark future, an era of impending trials where churches that had traded truth for convenience would empty, and those who truly desired to follow Christ would face persecutions like never before. I envisioned a scenario where the name of God would be spoken again, but no longer with respect. rather as a tool for manipulation and deceit. I understood that a time of separation was approaching, a period in which only those who authentically knew Jesus would stand firm. I was overwhelmed with the desire to cry out, to express that all of this was not right. How could I have been so wrong? How could so many churches be deceived? How could so many people, convinced they were on the right path, drift away from God without even realizing it? But then Jesus revealed something to me that made me tremble even more. He showed me that despite all that corruption, there was still a faithful remnant, small groups scattered around the world, people who sought no fame, who were not in the spotlight, but remained steadfast in the truth. They did not seek status nor desire the world's approval. They simply wanted Jesus, and in those forgotten places, their faith continued to shine. I witnessed the glory of God manifesting among the people. I observed the power of the Holy Spirit moving through those who yearned for the truth. It became clearer to me that true faith does not reside in grand buildings, but in the hearts of those who genuinely know and love God. Then, Jesus presented me with a choice. I could stay there and enjoy His presence, or return to warn those who still had time to awaken. For a moment, staying felt tempting. I was exhausted. My earthly body had no more strength, and the peace I felt there was indescribable, offering complete relief from everything I had gone through. But then, Jesus showed me something that chilled my soul. He revealed to me what would happen if I did not return. I saw some churches yielding to deception, millions drifting away from the truth without realizing it. I watched my own congregation continue their religious routines without ever truly encountering God, and I noticed souls that could have been saved, but only if they had been warned in time. I knew my answer even before I spoke a word. As much as I wanted to stay, as satisfying as that rest was, I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I couldn't simply accept that so many people would continue on that path without knowing the truth. I had to go back. I had to warn them. Jesus was offering me this opportunity, and I knew I couldn't waste it. As soon as I made my decision, I felt something indescribable. It was as if my soul was being pulled away with an uncontrollable force, as if it were being torn from that place. The brightness of Christ's presence began to fade, and before I could comprehend what was happening, I felt such a strong impact that my consciousness faded. Suddenly, I woke up, the sound of the heart monitor beeping so loudly it echoed in my head. The intensity of the hospital's white lights blinded me for a moment. It felt confusing and unreal. I blinked multiple times, trying to understand where I was. Then I heard voices, screams of surprise and sobs of relief. My family was there, and doctors and nurses rushed into the room, all struck with incredible amazement. "He's back," someone said. And at that precise moment, I understood the unthinkable. I was dead. They had declared me lifeless. I had felt my last breath leave my body. I had been on the other side, but now somehow I was back here again. My heart was beating. My lungs were filling with air, but I was no longer the same. Something inside me had changed forever. The hospital room was in chaos. Nurses were checking my vital signs. The doctors exchanged incredulous glances while my family wept, some kneeling beside my bed, uncertain whether to feel grateful or try to understand what had just happened. I didn't have enough strength to speak immediately, but inside, I knew I couldn't afford to waste time. I tried to lift myself up, but my body was still weak, my throat was dry, yet I forced the words out. "I have to tell you that I saw." But before I could continue, one of the doctors placed a hand on my shoulder, saying firmly, "Calm down, take a deep breath, you need to rest." How could I rest after what I had experienced? How could I simply lie there and act as if nothing had happened? I was dead. I had seen Jesus. I had witnessed a truth that no one wants to face. And now, somehow, I was back. As soon as I found a bit of my voice, I began to share my story, trying to convey what I had experienced, but soon I realized that not everyone wanted to listen. Some members of my family looked at me affectionately, as if they were just happy to see me alive, without giving my words the attention they deserved. Others, however, watched me with skepticism, as if all this was nothing but an illusion born from the trauma of death. The doctors completely dismissed it, assuming it was a neurological event that occurred in my final moments. But I knew that was not the case. I knew what I had experienced, and despite the doubts of many, I could not remain silent. Lying on that hospital bed, I began to narrate everything, from the void to the shadows to the visions. And above all, the question that had devastated me: do you know me? The reactions to my story left me stunned. I expected the people around me to kneel, repent, and sincerely plead with God, but that was far from the case. Instead, I was met with vacant stares, disbelief, and forced smiles, as if they were listening to an old man rambling about some dream. Some even seemed almost embarrassed, as if they wished I would simply be grateful to be alive and move on without dwelling too much on what I had experienced. But how could I do that? How could I ignore the truth after seeing it so clearly? Inside me, I felt an urgency I couldn't contain. I had to speak. I had to warn. However, in that hospital room, I came to understand an even more disturbing reality. Not everyone wants to hear the truth. Even among the priests who came to visit me, the reception was icy. I tried to share what I had seen and warn about what was happening in the church, but many refused to accept it. The church will never stray from this path, they said. We can't give credence to subjective experiences. We must adhere to doctrine. Every word felt like a boulder on my chest, and that's exactly the problem. They cling so tightly to structures and traditions that they don't want to consider the possibility of being on the wrong path. But I knew, I had seen. The deception had already taken root, and the truth was fading. The name of God continued to be spoken, but it was becoming less known. And even more tragically, even when Jesus gave me the chance to return and warn, many simply did not want to listen. But I couldn't give up. If Jesus brought me back, it was for a reason. Besides that, I was aware that most people preferred to remain in illusion. It was easier to believe they were on the right path rather than accept the possibility of being wrong. And despite doors closing and rejections increasing, I kept speaking. I didn't care if I was labeled as crazy or fanatic. If even one person could be reborn to the truth, then every minute spent would be worth it. As time went on, the vision I had of what Jesus had shown me became clearer. The world was heading towards critical times where true faith would become increasingly rare. The churches were full, but there was no sign of authentic transformation. The religious leaders seemed more concerned about numbers, influence, and success than the salvation of souls. I watched as Christians lived out a superficial faith, giving up genuine knowledge of God. Yet I also saw those who were awakening, people who began to seek God earnestly, questioning what they were used to hearing and realizing that something was amiss. These few represented hope and showed that there were still individuals who truly knew Him. Time went by, but that experience never left me. Even today, when I close my eyes, I feel the weight of the presence of Jesus, and I hear the question that echoes within me: do you know Him? This is the question I pose to everyone I meet. Do you really know Him? I'm not referring to knowing something about Him, or just attending church, or reciting verses from memory, or following traditions. I mean a genuine relationship with Him. Because in the end, what truly matters is whether we know Him intimately, if we have really dedicated our lives to Him, if our hearts belong to Him. Many ask me if I still fear death after. Alongside this, I was aware that most people preferred to remain in illusion. It was easier to believe they were on the right path than to admit they could be wrong. However, despite all the closed doors and rejections I faced, I continued to express my truth. I didn't care if I was labeled as crazy or a fanatic. If even one soul could awaken to the truth, that would justify every day I spent fighting. Over time, I began to perceive more clearly what Jesus had revealed to me. The world was heading towards very difficult times where true faith would become increasingly rare. I observed crowded churches, but I found no real transformation. I noticed religious leaders preoccupied with numbers, influence, and success, but not for the salvation of souls. I saw Christians living a comfortable and superficial faith without ever truly knowing God. Amid all this, however, I also glimpsed those who were awakening, people who were beginning to genuinely seek God, to ask questions, to realize that something was wrong with what they perceived. These few represented a hope. They showed that there were still individuals who truly knew Him. Time passed, but that experience never left me. Even today, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the weight of Jesus' presence and hear the question that resonates within me. Do you know Him? This is the question I pose to everyone I meet. Do you really know Him? I'm not talking about knowing just a few facts about Him, attending church or memorizing verses, nor about following traditions. I'm talking about a true knowledge, about an authentic relationship with Him. Because in the end, what matters is not how many times you've attended a service, how many prayers you've memorized, or how many roles you've held in the church. What truly matters is whether you really know Him, whether you have truly given Him your life, and if your heart belongs to Him. Many ask me if I still fear death after what I have experienced, and the answer is no, but not because I feel more ready than before. On the contrary, I now understand that being ready is not what I once imagined. In the past, I believed my security stemmed from my position, from my theological knowledge, and my commitment to the church. However, I now realize that true security lies only in Him. I invested too much time placing my trust in the religious structure when I should have been relying solely on Jesus. I know my mission is not yet over, but when my moment truly comes, I am sure I won't meet a stranger. I know I will see the one who gave me a second chance, and this time, when He asks me, "Do you know me?" my entire soul will respond, "Yes, Lord, I know you now." I don't expect everyone to accept what I've shared. Many will continue to live as if it's just another story, a strange narrative lost in the internet. They will continue to look for churches that tell them exactly what they want to hear, that don't challenge their beliefs, that make them feel good without requiring any transformation. But I'm sure some will listen. Some will feel deep in their hearts that there is something more. And for those people, I pray they seek the truth before it's too late. I don't know how much time I have left in this world. Maybe a few years, maybe a few days. But I'm not worried about that anymore. What I've seen has changed everything. Now I know that life doesn't revolve around religion, titles, or how many people admire us. It's solely about Him, only Him. My mission was to return and warn, and that's what I've done. Now the choice is in everyone's hands. If this experience has prompted you to reflect, I pose the same question that transformed everything for Lucas. Do you truly know Jesus? I'm not referring to following a religion or attending church, but to having an authentic relationship with Him. I'd love to hear what you think. What do you make of this story? Have you ever had a similar experience or know someone who has? Share it in the comments because your story could touch others. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications as we always bring transformative content that can change your perspective on life and faith. Don't miss the upcoming videos. By the way, the next video that will appear on the screen will leave you even more surprised. Click now and watch it. See you there. God bless you.